The sky above Tyrion was a deep shade of green, lit by 3 moons that floated like silver shields. Ryan had never seen a sky like this before. His small trade ship had landed on the edge of the capital city, a place of tall crystal towers and bridges shaped like giant wings. He stepped out with careful steps, his boots sinking slightly into the soft ground that glowed faintly under the light. Tyrion was known across the galaxy as a proud and ancient world, ruled by a royal family that kept old traditions alive. Ryan had come to trade simple goods. He carried medicines, tools, and seeds from distant planets. He hoped to exchange them for crystals and rare stones that only Tyrion produced. But he knew that the people of this world did not welcome humans easily. They believed humans were impatient and careless. Still, Ryan trusted his calm words and respectful manners would help him. The marketplace was alive with color and sound. Alien merchants in long robes shouted about their wares. The air smelled of spices and burning oils. Ryan walked among them with a polite smile, carrying a small pack on his back. He noticed how eyes followed him, some with curiosity, others with dislike. Children pointed at him, whispering to each other. It was clear that a human was a rare sight here. Ryan stopped at a stall where bright crystals glowed inside glass cases. He leaned closer to study them. The merchant gave a cold look but did not speak. Ryan nodded politely and stepped back, trying not to draw more attention. But as he turned, the crowd suddenly parted. Guards in silver armor walked forward, holding staffs that shone with light. Behind them came a young woman in a flowing robe of deep blue, her hair bound with golden threads. Her walk was steady, her chin lifted high. The people bowed as she passed. Ryan guessed quickly who she was. This had to be Princess Aera, daughter of the Tyrian king. She moved like someone used to command, her eyes sharp as a blade. Ryan lowered his gaze out of respect, but the marketplace was crowded. Someone behind him stumbled, pushing him forward. In that sudden moment, Ryan's hand brushed against the princess's hand as she passed. It was only a light touch, an accident caused by the push of the crowd. But the world around him froze. Gasps rose from every side. Merchants covered their mouths, guards raised their staffs, and the air grew tense. Touching the royal family was forbidden, an insult beyond words. Ryan's heart pounded as he realized the mistake. He quickly stepped back and opened his mouth to explain, but the princess had already stopped. Aera turned slowly, her eyes burning like twin stars. She raised her hand high, her voice clear enough for all to hear. "Touch me again, human, and you will pay the price." The marketplace fell into silence. No one dared to move. Ryan felt every eye on him. His throat was dry, but he forced himself to speak. "Princess, it was not my will," he said. "The crowd pushed me. Forgive my clumsiness." Aera's gaze stayed sharp, her raised hand trembling slightly as if she fought between anger and curiosity. The guards stepped forward, ready to seize him. Ryan knew he could resist, but resistance would only bring death. He dropped to one knee, lowering his head. "I meant no insult," he said again, his voice calm. "If my touch has offended, then I will accept your judgment." The crowd whispered, surprised by his words. Many had expected the human to argue, or to show fear. But Ryan's tone was steady, not proud, not weak, but firm. Princess Aera lowered her hand but did not smile. Her voice carried across the square. "You will come to the palace. My father will decide your fate." The guards took him by the arms, not roughly but firmly. Ryan walked with them, his head high, though his heart beat fast. He glanced once at the princess. She had already turned away, her robe flowing like water as she walked back through the crowd. Yet he noticed that she looked back for a brief moment, her eyes studying him as if she wished to know why he spoke without trembling. The journey to the palace was long. Towers of crystal stretched high, reflecting the moons. Bridges arched over rivers that shone like silver threads. Ryan tried to take in every sight, knowing he might not see this world again. At last they reached the great palace of Tyrion. Its gates were carved with patterns of stars and flames. Inside, the hall was wide and glowing with blue light. Nobles in fine robes stood along the sides, whispering as the guards brought Ryan forward. On a raised throne sat the king of Tyrion, a tall figure with hair like white fire and eyes that seemed to see through all lies. Princess Aerys stood at his side, her chin still high, her expression unreadable. The guards pushed Ryan to his knees. The king's voice was deep and cold. "A human touches my daughter. Why should I not end his life here and now?" Ryan lifted his head. His voice was steady though the weight of the hall pressed on him. "Great king, I am Ryan of the traitors. I came with peace in my hands. What happened was not my choice." The crowd pressed, and in that moment my hand brushed hers. "I ask not for mercy, only for the chance to prove my respect." Whispers spread again. Some nobles laughed softly, mocking the idea of a human speaking with such calm. Others frowned, surprised at his courage. Princess Aerys studied him closely. She remembered the warmth of his hand, brief but real. She had expected fear, maybe begging, but not this steady gaze. The king leaned forward. His eyes narrowed. "Very well. You will not die today. But you will remain under guard until I decide your worth. If you are found lacking, your life will be short. If you prove useful, perhaps the insult may be forgotten." The guards pulled Ryan to his feet. The hall was filled with whispers again. Some called him foolish, others brave. Ryan met the princess's eyes for only a moment. Her expression was cool, but there was something else in her gaze. It was not only anger. It was curiosity. And so the human traitor found himself a prisoner within the heart of Tyrion's palace. He did not know if he would live or die, but he knew one thing with certainty. The story had only begun. The palace of Tyrion was like a living jewel. Its walls shimmered with colors that shifted as the moons passed over the sky. Ryan had never seen such beauty, yet he was not free to enjoy it. Guards in silver armor walked behind him at every step. He was taken to a chamber high in one of the towers. It was not a prison, but it was not freedom either. The room held a soft bed, carved tables, and windows that opened to the glowing rivers below. Ryan stood by the window, his hands resting on the stone frame. He thought about what had happened in the marketplace. One mistake, one brief touch, had brought him here. He knew he could not escape the palace. He also knew he had to find a way to prove himself before the king and his people. Hours passed before the door opened again. A servant in a plain robe entered, carrying food on a silver tray. Behind the servant came Princess Aerys herself. Her presence filled the chamber like cold fire. Ryan turned quickly, lowering his head in respect. "You stand in the house of kings," Aerys said, her voice firm. "Do not forget it." "I have not forgotten, Princess," Ryan answered quietly. Aerys stepped closer, her eyes sharp. "You speak calmly. Are you not afraid of death?" Ryan looked up, meeting her gaze. "Fear is there, Princess, but it does not guide me. I know what I did was not meant. If my life is to end for it, then I will accept it. But I will not crawl like a worm before you. That would not honor me, nor you. For a moment silence stretched between them. Era studied him with a gaze that seemed to search his very thoughts. Her people were used to humans showing weakness or arrogance. Yet this one spoke with steady words, neither proud nor broken. You are strange for a human, she said at last. Perhaps that is why my father wishes to test you. Ryan gave a small nod. If he wishes me tested, I will face it. Era turned, walking toward the door, her robe brushing against the floor. But before she left, she glanced back once more. Do not think kindness will save you. Here on Tyrion, respect is earned by strength and wisdom. Fail, and you will be cast aside. When she was gone, Ryan let out a slow breath. He could see she still held anger, but there was also curiosity in her words. Perhaps, he thought, she wanted to see if he truly was different from what she believed. The next morning the guards came for him. They led him into the great hall once again, where nobles stood lined in rows, eager to see what the human would face. The king sat upon his throne, his white hair glowing under the lights. Princess Aerys stood at his side, silent but watchful. Ryan of the traitors, the king spoke, his voice heavy with power. You claim your touch was by accident. You claim you came with peace. Words are wind. We will see if your actions carry weight. You shall face the trials of Tyrion. If you succeed, you may live. If you fail, you shall die with no more than a whisper. The hall filled with murmurs. The trials were known as harsh tests of wit and endurance. Few outsiders had ever faced them, and fewer still had survived. Ryan bowed his head. I accept, King of Tyrion. The first trial was set in the Hall of Questions. Ryan was led into a chamber where walls of crystal reflected light in endless patterns. A group of scholars stood waiting. They placed before him puzzles carved on stone, questions of history, and riddles twisted with old wisdom. The nobles expected him to stumble. They believed humans could not grasp the deep traditions of Tyrian thought. Yet Ryan listened carefully to each question. He did not know their history, but he used logic and patience to untangle their riddles. Where others might rush, he thought slowly, turning each word in his mind. His answers were not perfect, but they were honest and clear. By the end of the trial, whispers spread again. Some scholars nodded with respect, while others frowned, unwilling to admit a human had shown skill. The second trial came swiftly. Ryan was taken to the Garden of Balance. There, narrow bridges stretched over pools of glowing water. The task was simple in words yet hard in truth. He had to cross each bridge while carrying a heavy stone, without falling. The guards placed the stone upon his back, and the nobles watched from the sides. Ryan stepped onto the first bridge. His legs shook at the weight, but he kept his pace steady. He remembered the long journeys of his people, how humans crossed deserts and mountains with burdens heavier than this. Step by step, he reached the other side. On the second bridge the weight felt greater, and the wind pulled at him. He nearly slipped, but he dropped to his knees, crawling forward until he reached safety. Laughter came from some nobles, but he ignored it. By the time he crossed the third and final bridge, sweat ran down his face, but he stood tall. The crowd was not laughing now. Even Princess Aero leaned forward slightly, her eyes fixed on him. The third trial was the hardest. He was placed in a chamber where machines created illusions of fear. Shadows moved, voices whispered, and shapes of beasts formed from the walls. It was meant to break the spirit of any who entered. Ryan closed his eyes and breathed slowly. He reminded himself that fear was only a thought. The beasts were not real, the whispers only tricks. Step by step, he walked forward until he reached the exit. When the doors opened, he stood calm, while the nobles stared in silence. When he returned to the great hall, the king spoke again. You have walked the paths of the trials. You did not fail. Yet know this, human. You are not free. Your life still rests in my hand. Ryan bowed once more. I understand, king. I ask for nothing more than the chance to show that humans are more than you believe. The king's eyes narrowed, but he did not reply. He lifted his hand, ending the gathering. Guards led Ryan back to his chamber. As he walked past, Ryan saw Princess Aira's eyes follow him. There was no anger in her gaze this time. There was thought, weighing him like a question not yet answered. That night, Ryan sat by the window again, watching the silver rivers glow beneath the moons. He knew he had not won his freedom, but he had planted a seed. Aira had seen him stand without fear, and her people had seen it too. The trials were only the beginning. Greater storms were yet to come. The days after the trials moved slowly inside the palace of Tyrion. Ryan was not free, but his chamber no longer felt like a prison. The guards still watched his steps, yet their eyes held less scorn than before. Even servants, once silent and cold, now offered him food with slight bows. The trials had not won him honor, but they had won him something more valuable than fear. They had won him notice. Still, Ryan knew his place was not secure. The king had not spoken of his future, and many nobles still whispered that a human had no right to walk their halls. At night he often stood by the high windows, looking out at the glowing rivers and wondering if his next dawn would bring judgment or a chance to prove more. One morning, the sound of footsteps came outside his chamber. The door opened, and Princess Aira entered, followed by two guards. She walked with her usual proud grace, her robe trailing like a wave of midnight. Ryan stood and bowed his head. You survived the trials, Aira said, her voice calm yet edged with challenge. But survival does not mean you belong here. Tell me, human, why do you endure so much only to stay alive in a world that despises you? Ryan met her gaze. Because life is worth fighting for, princess. Not only my life, but the chance to show that my people are more than what is believed. If I die here as nothing, then your court will say humans are weak. If I live with honor, perhaps they will think differently. Aira studied him, her sharp eyes trying to pierce his thoughts. You speak of honor, yet your kind is known for greed and haste. Why should I think you are different? Because I am here, Ryan replied simply. Because I stand and do not run. Because I choose respect even when I am given none. Her lips tightened, but she said nothing. Instead, she turned and gestured for him to follow. The guards led them through long halls, past walls of crystal that glowed with shifting light. At last they entered a courtyard filled with tall silver trees whose leaves shimmered like glass. Nobles were already gathered there, their robes bright with colors of rank. At the center stood the king, his presence like a mountain. Today we test more than your strength, the king declared, his deep voice carrying across the courtyard. Words and riddles may be passed. Illusions may be endured. But a man's worth is proven when all watch him act. You will face the trial of worth. A murmur spread through the nobles. The trial of worth was not a set path like the others. It was a test chosen by the court, often cruel, always public. Ryan stepped forward without hesitation. "I accept, King," he said. The king raised his hand. From the far side of the courtyard, a creature was brought forth. It was tall as a horse, with scales that shimmered green and black. Its mouth was lined with sharp teeth, and its eyes glowed with wild fire. The nobles drew back as the beast roared, shaking the air. "This is the Varrock," the king said. "A creature of our wild lands. You will face it with nothing but your hands. Defeat it, and you may prove yourself. Fall, and you prove what we already believe." Ryan's heart pounded, but he stood firm. The guards unchained the beast, and it stepped forward, claws scraping the stone ground. Its eyes locked on him, hungry and fierce. The nobles whispered, some laughing softly, sure the human would be crushed. Princess Ares stood silent, her eyes fixed on him. The Varrock lunged. Ryan rolled aside, feeling the rush of air as claws missed his chest. He had no weapon, no armor, only his wits. He remembered the lessons of survival from his journeys. Strength alone would not win. The beast was faster and stronger. He needed to turn its power against itself. As the Varrock charged again, Ryan grabbed a long branch that had fallen from one of the silver trees. It was not much, but it gave him reach. He swung it with both hands, striking the beast's head. The branch cracked but did not break. The Varrock roared in anger, swinging its tail. The blow sent Ryan stumbling back, pain burning in his side. The nobles laughed louder now, mocking his weakness. But Ryan did not stop. He rose again, steadying himself. He looked not at the beast's teeth or claws but at its eyes, wild and unthinking. That was its weakness. It was fierce, but it lacked reason. He stepped back toward the pool at the edge of the courtyard, drawing the Varrock closer. When it lunged again, he leapt aside at the last instant. The beast's own weight carried it forward. Its claws scraped on the smooth stone, and with a great splash it fell into the glowing water. The pool hissed as its energy touched the beast's scales. The Varrock thrashed, struggling to climb out. Ryan seized the branch and struck its head again, pushing it deeper. At last the creature went still, its glowing eyes fading. Silence filled the courtyard. The nobles stared, their laughter gone. Slowly, Ryan lowered the broken branch and stood, breathing hard but tall. The king's eyes narrowed, his face unreadable. "You have defeated the Varrock. Perhaps there is more to you than I thought." Whispers spread again, not of mockery now but of surprise. Some nobles even nodded, though reluctantly. Princess Ares stepped forward. Her voice was calm, but there was a faint shift in her tone. "You did not win with strength alone. You used thought. That is rare, even among our own." Ryan bowed his head. "I used what I had, Princess. Nothing more." The king raised his hand, ending the gathering. "You may live another day, human. But know this. You are still unproven. You remain in my hall until your true worth is clear." Ryan was led back to his chamber once more. His body ached, his side bruised, but his spirit held firm. He knew this was only the beginning. Yet he also knew something had changed. The nobles no longer saw him only as a weak outsider. The princess no longer looked at him with only anger. That night, when the moons rose high and the rivers glowed beneath the palace, Ryan stood by the window again. He touched the bruises on his side and smiled faintly. The trial of worth had shown the court one truth. Humans could endure, humans could think, and humans could fight in ways their world did not expect. And deep within the palace, Princess Aira thought of the same truth. The human was not what she had imagined. And that thought unsettled her more than anger ever had. The palace of Tyrion was filled with whispers after the trial of Worth. Some nobles praised the human's cleverness, though many spoke with bitter tongues. A few even said the Varrock had been weak, and that Ryan's victory meant little. But the truth could not be denied. He had faced the beast and lived. That alone made him different from what they believed. Ryan remained under watch, yet the air around him had changed. Guards no longer looked at him as if he were already dead. Servants spoke a little more, asking if he needed water or food. Still, danger lingered. He could feel it in the way some nobles stared at him with cold eyes, as if wishing he had failed. One evening, as the moons rose high, Ryan was called again to the great hall. The king sat on his throne, his white hair shining under the crystal lights. Princess Aira stood by his side, her gaze steady. The hall was full of nobles, their robes flowing like rivers of color. The king's voice was deep and heavy. "Human, you have survived where others would fall. Yet Tyrion does not measure a life only by trials. Our land faces shadows beyond these walls. If you would remain here, you must show not only strength, but loyalty. Tonight you will stand among us at the Feast of Unity. Do not forget your place." Ryan bowed. "I will remember, King." The Feast of Unity was unlike anything Ryan had seen. Long tables stretched across the hall, heavy with dishes of glowing fruit, steaming meat, and spiced bread. Music filled the air, and dancers in silver masks moved between the tables. Nobles lifted crystal cups, toasting the king and his line. Ryan was placed near the lower end of the table, far from the throne. Some nobles ignored him, others whispered mocking words, but he remained calm. He ate little, drinking only water, keeping his eyes open. He had traveled many worlds and knew that danger often came when joy was loudest. His caution proved true. As the night deepened, servants moved through the hall carrying trays. Ryan's eyes caught something strange. One servant's steps were too steady, his eyes too sharp. When he passed behind the princess, his hand slipped toward his robe. Ryan saw the gleam of metal. Without thought, Ryan leapt from his seat. His chair crashed behind him as he rushed forward. The nobles gasped, some shouting in anger at his boldness. But before they could stop him, Ryan seized the servant's arm just as a hidden blade flashed in the light. The hall erupted in chaos. Guards shouted, nobles scattered, and the false servant tried to strike again. Ryan twisted the arm, forcing the blade to the ground. The two struggled, knocking over plates and cups. At last, the guards reached them, seizing the attacker and dragging him away. Princess Aira stood frozen for a breath, her eyes wide. The blade had been inches from her back. Slowly she turned toward Ryan. "You saw what none of us did," she said, her voice low. Ryan nodded, breathing hard. "Danger often hides in plain sight, princess. I have learned to watch." The king rose, his eyes blazing. "Who sent this assassin?" he demanded. But the servant only spat, refusing to speak. He was dragged away to the dungeons. The hall slowly returned to order, though the air was heavy. Nobles spoke in hushed voices, some casting glances at Ryan with new respect, others with anger that a human had saved the royal line. Later that night, after the feast ended, Aira came to Ryan's chamber. She entered without guards this time, her steps quiet. Ryan stood as she approached. "You risked your life," she said. "Why? You could have remained seated." None would have blamed you if I had fallen. Ryan shook his head. I could not. Where I come from, we do not let harm fall on those near us if we can stop it. Life is life, princess, whether friend or stranger. Era's eyes softened for a moment, though her voice remained strong. You speak as if you value all lives. Yet you know many here do not value yours. Then perhaps my actions will plant a seed, Ryan said. A seed that may grow, if given time. For a moment, silence filled the chamber. Era looked at him with a strange expression, part anger, part thought, and something else Ryan could not name. At last she turned toward the door. My father will not forget what you did tonight, she said. Nor will I. But do not think this means you are safe. Shadows are rising in Tyrion. You have stepped into them, whether you wished to or not. When she was gone, Ryan sat by the window once more. The rivers below glowed silver, and the moons painted the towers with pale light. He touched the place on his arm where the assassin had struck him during the struggle. It ached, but the pain reminded him that he still lived. He thought of Era's eyes when she turned toward him after the attack. For the first time, there had been no anger in them. Instead, there had been a question. A question of why a human would risk everything for someone who had sworn to punish him. The next morning, the palace buzzed with news of the attack. Some nobles claimed the assassin was part of a distant rebellion. Others whispered that betrayal hid within the palace itself. Guards doubled at the gates, and patrols filled the halls. Ryan listened quietly, speaking little. But deep inside, he knew the truth. The world of Tyrion was cracking. Its beauty was bright, but shadows crawled beneath it. He had saved the princess once, but he felt this was not the last time danger would come. As the days passed, Ryan noticed more signs. Strange messages carried by servants. Guards who looked uneasy. Even the air in the palace felt heavy. And always, the eyes of Princess Era found him in the hall. She no longer spoke with sharp scorn, yet she did not smile either. She watched, as if waiting to see what he would do when the storm truly broke. And Ryan knew the storm was coming. The attempt on the princess was not the end. It was only the first strike of a much larger threat. The palace of Tyrion grew restless after the feast. The failed assassination of Princess Era left nobles divided. Some wanted harsher rules, others whispered of rebellion in the far provinces. Guards patrolled every corridor, their silver armor glinting in the torchlight. Songs of joy no longer echoed through the halls. Fear had entered the palace, and it spread like unseen fire. Ryan felt the change each day. Though he remained a guest watched by guards, he noticed the eyes of servants flicking nervously toward shadows. He heard whispers of secret meetings and saw couriers riding at night through the palace gates. Danger was close, and the wound in his arm still ached like a warning. One evening, when the moons rose above the towers, Princess Era came to his chamber. She came without her guards again, her robe a deep crimson that shimmered in the dim light. Ryan rose as she entered. You were right, Era said. The shadows grow bolder. Another plot has been uncovered in the lower courts. My father speaks of enemies beyond the borders, but I fear the true danger may already be inside our walls. Ryan listened carefully. If the enemy is inside, then even the king's throne is not safe. She studied him with those sharp eyes of hers. Why do you care? You are a human, not of this land. My people mistrust you, my nobles despise you. You have no reason to guard Tyrion. Ryan answered without pause. Because I am here. Because I share your halls, eat your food, and walk your floors. If danger comes and I stand idle, then I am no better than the one who strikes from the dark. That is not my way. Era's gaze softened for a moment, then grew firm again. She stepped closer, lowering her voice. You speak as if honor rules your heart. Tell me, Ryan, is it truth or a mask to win favor? Ryan met her eyes without fear. It is truth. A mask is easy to wear, but it falls when storms rise. My storms have risen already, yet I still stand the same. For the first time since their meeting, Era did not reply with cold words. She looked at him quietly, as if searching for a flaw she could not find. At last, she turned and sat on the carved seat by the window. My people think strength is only in sword and power, she said slowly. But when the assassin struck, it was you who acted before even my guards. That was not strength of the body. It was something else. Awareness, Ryan said. The will to act when danger shows its face. Where I come from, we call it courage, though it is not the absence of fear. It is moving forward even with fear close behind. The princess lowered her gaze. Her voice softened, almost as if speaking to herself. Courage. Yes, perhaps that is what Tyrion has forgotten. Silence filled the chamber. The glow of the moons painted their faces pale. For a long moment, they were not princess and prisoner but two souls sharing truth. But the moment broke when the door opened. A guard stepped in, bowing. Princess, your father calls for you. Urgent news has come from the border. Era rose quickly, her proud face returning. She gave Ryan one last look before leaving. The door closed, leaving him alone with the heavy silence. The next day, news spread that raiders had attacked villages near the border. The king's council debated long into the night. Some demanded war, others warned of traps. Through it all, Ryan remained in his chamber, yet word reached him from servants who whispered of deep cracks forming in the kingdom. 2 nights later, as Ryan rested by the window, a soft knock came at his door. When he opened it, he found not Era but a young servant with frightened eyes. Master Ryan, the boy whispered. There are whispers in the kitchens. They say another attempt will be made on the princess. Tonight, during her walk in the moon garden. Ryan's heart tightened. He thanked the boy and moved at once. The guards outside tried to stop him, but he spoke firmly. I must go to the garden. If harm comes to the princess while you delay me, the king himself will ask why. Reluctantly, they followed as he hurried through the halls. The moon garden lay beyond the eastern wing, where silver trees grew tall under the open sky. Era often walked there at night, seeking quiet. Ryan arrived just as she entered the garden, her robe trailing behind her, 2 guards at her side. He called softly. Princess. She turned, surprised. Why are you here? Because danger is near, Ryan said. The whispers speak of another strike. Even as he spoke, shadows moved among the trees. Figures cloaked in black stepped forward, blades shining. The guards rushed to defend, but the attackers moved with skill. One guard fell quickly, the other forced back. Ryan grabbed a fallen branch, just as he had in the trial. He swung it against the nearest attacker, knocking the blade aside. Another rushed him, but he ducked low, sweeping the legs out from under the cloaked figure. The ground shook as the man fell. Era herself stood firm, her voice sharp as she called for her guards. Yet she too was forced back toward the silver trees. An attacker raised his blade to strike her. Ryan threw himself forward, seizing the man's arm. Pain burned as the blade cut his shoulder, but he forced the weapon free and struck the attacker down. The fight ended as more palace guards rushed in. The surviving attackers fled into the night, vanishing among the glowing rivers. The moon garden lay in ruins, branches broken, blood dark upon the stones. Aerith turned to Ryan, her eyes wide, her breath quick. For the second time, he had stood between her and death. She stepped closer, her voice low. "Why do you do this again, human? Twice now you have bled for me. Why?" Ryan's voice was calm though his wound stung. "Because life is worth more than my fear. And because I could not stand and watch you fall." For a long moment, Aero looked at him without speaking. The cold fire in her eyes was gone. In its place was something softer, though still hidden behind her pride. "You are strange," she whispered. "Strange, but true." The guards gathered around, leading her back to safety. Ryan followed, his shoulder bleeding, yet his step steady. That night, as he rested with bandages around his wound, he thought of Aera's words. Strange, but true. Perhaps that was what he was to her. Perhaps that was what humans were to all of Tyrion. And far away in her chamber, Princess Aera thought of him too. She had once raised her hand and sworn he would pay the price for touching her. Now she wondered if the true price was not anger, but the change he brought into her heart. The palace of Tyrion had never felt so tense. Shadows lingered in every hall, and whispers moved faster than footsteps. The failed attacks on Princess Aera had shaken the court. Even the king's trusted advisors looked unsure, their confident words now mixed with doubt. Guards patrolled in pairs and trios, yet none could guarantee safety. Ryan sensed it too. Each day he walked through the palace corridors, he noticed subtle movements in the shadows, quick glances between nobles, and the faint hum of concealed devices in the walls. His hand brushed the scar on his shoulder from the Moon Garden attack, a constant reminder that danger had not left. One morning, the palace bells rang urgently. The king's voice echoed through the halls. All must gather in the great hall. Ryan followed the other guests, guided by the same guards who had begun to trust his instincts. Princess Aera stood at the throne, calm yet tense, her gaze sweeping the gathered nobles. A sudden cry echoed from the doors. Soldiers rushed forward, only to find the doors barred. Screams came from the inner halls, and a group of masked figures stormed into the great hall. The king's council tried to stop them, but the attackers were too many and too fast. The hall erupted in chaos. Ryan reacted immediately. He rushed toward the princess, who was being pushed back by the first wave of attackers. With quick thinking, he grabbed a nearby torch, swinging it to knock weapons aside and clear a path. Guards followed, inspired by his courage. The hall, filled with chaos, began to shift as humans and Tyrian soldiers worked together. Aera's voice cut through the noise. "Ryan, this way." She led him toward the side exit, past shattered crystal columns and overturned tables. The masked figures were skilled, moving as if they knew every corner of the palace. Ryan noticed a pattern. The attackers avoided certain areas, suggesting they had an inside guide. His mind raced, thinking through the palace layout. They know the palace too well. Someone from here is helping them, he shouted over the noise. Aera stopped, her eyes sharp. "Do you think someone in my court would betray us?" "I do," Ryan said. "And we must reach safety before they strike again." They ran together through corridors and hidden passages. Ryan's knowledge of movement and timing allowed them to evade the attackers. He realized that the human skill of observation, honed from years of travel and trade, gave him an edge even in a palace designed for royalty. Finally, they reached a room with a small balcony overlooking the glowing rivers. Era stopped, catching her breath. "The king?" she asked. "Still in the hall," Ryan replied. "But the attackers have the advantage. We must help him." Era nodded, her hand resting briefly on his arm. "Then we do this together." They returned to the great hall, moving swiftly along hidden corridors. Ryan led the charge, using objects in the room to block the attackers, throwing tables and chairs to slow their advance. Guards who had once doubted him now followed, inspired by his bravery. In the chaos, one attacker lunged at the king. Ryan intercepted him, grappling and using his weight to pin the figure. The mask fell off, revealing a noble from the outer court. The king's voice boomed, filled with both anger and disbelief. "Betrayal! I never thought one of my own would turn against us." The other attackers hesitated, their formation broken by the revelation. Era moved forward, her voice commanding. "Stop! You serve no one by harming your own people." The rebels fled, leaving the hall in ruins. Guards quickly secured the room, binding the remaining attackers. The nobles who had been complicit were arrested, and the king regained control of his court. Ryan stood, breathing hard, his shoulder aching from the earlier scuffle. He looked around and saw Era watching him. Her eyes were no longer filled with anger. They were filled with respect, and perhaps something deeper. "You saved my father, my court, and this palace," Era said, her voice steady but soft. "Not with power alone, but with strategy, courage, and careful thought." "I misjudged you, Ryan." Ryan bowed slightly. "I only acted as any living being should. To protect life when it is threatened." Era smiled faintly, the first genuine smile he had seen on her face. "Your actions today will not be forgotten, either by me or by Tyrion. Humans are stronger than we thought." The king approached, his face serious but not angry. "Ryan, you have done what few could. You have proven your worth to Tyrion in a way words cannot measure. For that, you shall remain in my palace, not as a prisoner, but as a trusted guest. You have my respect and my thanks." Ryan felt a weight lift from his shoulders. He had survived trials, assassins, and betrayal, yet the cost had been high. He had risked his life multiple times, yet he had gained something more valuable than freedom alone. He had gained trust, and perhaps even friendship. That night, as the palace slowly returned to order, Ryan and Era walked together along the upper terraces. The moons reflected on the rivers below, casting a silver glow on the palace towers. "You once told me to earn respect," Era said softly. "I see now that you already have it, not only from me but from your actions. I will admit, it surprises me that a human can be so steadfast." Ryan smiled faintly. "Perhaps your people will learn that humans are not to be underestimated. We endure, we think, and we act when needed. That is what makes us strong." Era looked at him for a long moment, her eyes reflecting the light of the moons. "You have changed the way I see your kind. I do not yet understand it fully, but I want to." Ryan nodded. "And I will continue to show you. For now, your life and your people are safe. Tomorrow, we can think of what comes next." As they walked along the terrace, the palace silent around them, Ryan felt a sense of calm for the first time in many days. The storm of betrayal had passed, but he knew that challenges would continue. Yet he was ready. With courage, careful thought, and respect, he could face any trial Tyrion might offer. And deep within the palace, Princess Aira thought of him differently than ever before. The human who had once touched her by accident had now proven his worth not only in battle but in heart. The warning she had once given seemed distant now, replaced by a recognition of something rare and true. The palace of Tyrion slowly returned to peace after the attack. The nobles who had betrayed the king were removed, and new leaders were chosen from those whose loyalty was unquestioned. Guards patrolled carefully, but the threat of immediate danger had lessened. Ryan, once a prisoner, was now treated as a valued guest. Yet he remained humble, knowing that trust had to be maintained and that shadows still lingered beyond the palace walls. Princess Aira approached him one morning in the gardens. The silver trees glowed softly under the twin moons, and the air smelled of blooming night flowers. She walked with calm grace, but her eyes were sharp as ever. "Ryan," she said, her voice quiet yet firm. "You have done more than any outsider could. You have saved lives, uncovered betrayal, and proven that humans can be trusted. For that, you have my thanks." Ryan bowed slightly. "I only did what I could, Princess. Life is precious, and it is the duty of those who can act to do so." Aira studied him, then nodded. "You have a mind unlike any I have seen. Your courage is true, yet your thoughtfulness sets you apart from your kind. My people will remember this day." Ryan smiled faintly. "Then perhaps your people will learn to see humans differently. We are not only strong, but we endure, we think, and we act when needed." The princess's gaze softened, though her pride remained. "It seems you have earned not only respect but understanding. That is rarer than courage in Tyrion." The king summoned Ryan soon after. The great hall was filled with nobles and soldiers, their faces reflecting curiosity and admiration. Princess Aira stood at the side of her father, her posture calm and regal. "Ryan," the king said, his deep voice carrying across the hall, "your actions have changed the court's opinion of humans. You have risked your life to protect this palace and my daughter. Your trials are complete, and your worth is proven. From this day forward, you will remain in Tyrion as an honored guest. You will advise, learn, and help guide our people when needed." Ryan bowed deeply, humbled by the honor. "I will serve with all I can, King of Tyrion." The nobles whispered among themselves, some in awe, some still skeptical. Yet none could deny the truth of his deeds. The princess's eyes met his briefly, and in that glance, Ryan felt a bond forming, one born not of obligation but of trust. Days turned into weeks. Ryan walked through the palace freely, observing, learning, and helping where he could. He assisted the engineers in improving security, advised the scholars on trade from distant worlds, and worked with the guards to train them in tactics he had learned from his travels. Princess Aira often joined him. She asked questions, listened to his experiences, and shared her own thoughts about ruling Tyrion. They debated strategies, discussed history, and sometimes simply walked among the glowing rivers and silver trees. Slowly, the walls of misunderstanding began to fall. One evening, as the moons rose high, Aira approached Ryan near the palace terrace. The rivers below reflected the silver light, and the towers glimmered softly. "You have changed my view of humans," she said quietly. "When we first met, I raised my hand to warn you, to keep you away. I thought your kind was reckless and weak. Now, I see strength in ways I did not expect." Ryan met her gaze. "Perhaps all beings have strength, Princess. It is a matter of proving it through actions, not words." She smiled faintly. "You have proven much, Ryan. And I see now that fear and anger are not the only ways to guide people. Courage, thought, and care can do more than swords or orders. Ryan felt a warmth at her words, yet he remained modest. I only hope to continue proving it, not for myself, but for your people and for Tyrion. Aera nodded, looking at the glowing rivers. You have done more than survive. You have built trust. That is rarer than bravery, and far more valuable. The palace felt alive that night, yet calm. Guards patrolled the corridors, but smiles returned to the halls. Nobles began to speak openly of rebuilding and improving Tyrion. And everywhere, the story of the human who saved the princess spread, inspiring both humans and aliens alike. Ryan reflected on all that had happened. From a simple trader to a prisoner, to a hero in the eyes of Tyrion, his journey had been difficult. Yet it had been worth it. He had learned about courage, about patience, and about the value of acting with respect and thought. Princess Aera joined him once more, standing quietly by the terrace railing. Ryan, she said, you have earned a place here, not just in the palace, but in the hearts of my people. Perhaps someday, humans and Tyrians will walk together as allies, as friends. That is the hope your actions have given us. Ryan looked at her, the moons reflecting in his eyes. Then we will work for it, Princess. Together, we will show that understanding and courage can bridge worlds. The two stood side by side, looking out over Tyrion. The glowing rivers, the silver trees, the towers, and the stars above all seemed brighter now. The trials, the betrayals, the dangers, they had forged something stronger than fear or anger. They had forged respect, trust, and hope. And in that light, Ryan realized that his journey was not yet over. Challenges would come, for every world has its storms. Yet with courage, thought, and alliances born from trust, even the greatest threats could be faced. Princess Aera turned to him one last time that night. You have changed my world, Ryan. For that, I will never forget you. Ryan bowed his head slightly, humbled. And I will never forget Tyrion, Princess. For here I have found not only challenge, but honor, and a chance to be part of something greater than myself. As the moons glowed above, Tyrion felt alive again. Its people began to hope, its leaders began to trust, and a human who was once a stranger had become a symbol of courage and understanding. The palace was safe, the shadows held at bay, and the bond between human and alien princess had been forged in trials, in courage, and in the strength of respect. And thus, the story of Ryan and Princess Aera reached its first true peace, leaving behind a legacy of bravery, wisdom, and unity between worlds.